11 documents today, including the formal appointment proposal, evidence that ministers were content with the proposal, internal communications, media and press briefings. And these documents speak for themselves, of course, and all honourable members can read them. They're available in the Vote Office. But I want to assure the House that we have proceeded on the basis of maximum transparency and have only redacted material that bears no relevance to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, such as travel proposals for other members of the royal family or content that would otherwise prejudice international relations. I reiterate, the Government is fully cooperating with Thames Valley Police in their investigation into potential misconduct in public office. I commend this statement to the House.
Minister Dame Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for advance sight of both the long version of his statement and the short version of his statement. So obviously we support the humble address and we continue to support full transparency on this matter. So I just have a few questions for the Minister. Is this, and I think he said this is just the start of a full disclosure, and could he share with the House if there is going to be further disclosure, or is this the final amount? Can he give the House, if there are going to be further tranches, a clear and final timetable for when the process will be complete? Is the absence of a formal record of due diligence or any vetting process evidence that the Government itself raised no questions at the time about the appointment? And where, if anywhere, are the documented concerns or challenge from officials or ministers at the time? And can I ask the Minister directly, when will the full set of files that this House has requested relating to Lord Mandelson's role, particularly any advice, correspondence or due diligence connected to his appointment, be released to the House? Finally, the Minister has a large trade envoy programme today under his responsibility. So what due diligence is the Government doing on appointees to that trade envoy programme, and are they following a code of conduct governing their behaviour today? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes, there was a long version, but to be honest, I was basically reading out the written ministerial statement which we laid at 10:30 this morning, and I thought that that was a bit, much as I love the sound of my own voice, I'm not sure that the House does. So I thought I would go, I think I have united the House now, I thought I would go for the shorter version, and to be honest, the papers do speak for themselves. Will there be more, was one of her questions. I suspect there won't. I think this is nearly everything, and I think this is everything we have come across so far, certainly. Of course, we will keep on looking, notwithstanding the complexity that there is about searching in paper-based systems in multiple different departments. I guarantee the House that if there is more to publish, I will come back to the House with more, but I suspect that this may be our last tranche. She asked whether ministers raised questions back at the time. I have published everything that relates to that period. That is, I think, there's nothing else, I think, to be found. So the statements that say that ministers were content, I think, is the sum total of the response. And I suppose to some degree that is understandable, bearing in mind that the Palace had made it very clear that Her Majesty, Her late Majesty, was very keen that Andrew be given a job, and Andrew was keen to take on the job, and the job had previously been done by another member of the royal family, and broadly speaking, the same set of terms. I'm afraid I can't answer the question about the Lord Mandelson papers for the simple reason that I've been trying very much to keep this humble address very separate from the other one. We had a different set of procedures to go through. I briefed members of the Conservative front bench and indeed members of the Liberal Democrat front bench earlier this week, when they indicated that they'd be perfectly happy if we weren't making a statement or an urgent question of any kind, because the papers speak for themselves. On trade envoys, it's a perfectly legitimate point. I made the point last time round that whilst I understand the connection people make between the role that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor played and modern trade envoys, they are actually very, very different, partly because of the royal nature of Andrew's role in the past, but also because all all trade envoys that we appoint at the moment are, of course, members of either this House or the House of Lords. They're not only bound by the code of conduct of this House or the other House, but they're also bound in exactly the same way as any minister would be in terms of the code that is expected of them. So we make all of this extremely clear to trade envoys. I've gathered the trade envoys since I've been appointed, I think, together on 2 or 3 occasions now, and whenever a new one is appointed, I sit with them and go through the details. I can hear the honourable member at the back chuntering in his regular application process to be made a trade envoy, and I'm still considering his proposal.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has so far given us 2 reasons for why his written statement, or the statement he's just given at the dispatch box, is different from the one that was sent embargoed an hour ago. If it's the same as the written statement, why was it sent out as embargoed? And dare I say it, Madam Deputy Speaker, I should say that transparency should not be trumped by time limits in relation to the business of this House. But it's been 3 months since the House passed the Liberal Democrat humble address to release the files showing how and why Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was appointed as a UK Special Representative for Trade and Investment. And in that time until today, the Government has only published 1 written statement which told us very little. The Minister has not previously come to the dispatch box at all, and I do have to note the difference in relation to the humble address in the name of the official opposition for Peter Mandelson and the humble address that we're discussing now. Now, the files we have seen show that there was no vetting by the Government, and even without vetting, no questions appear to have been asked. And the lack of documentation provided is itself concerning, as is the time taken to get this far. The Minister has said that he's not sure if there is more. Can I ask him when he will be sure and when he will release any remaining documents? And the documents we do have clearly show concerns about the potential for conflicts of interest. It started with golf, but we all know what came next. And why did that not lead to any scrutiny or vetting, not just at the start, but at any stage during his tenure as an envoy? The guardrails were not in place. The appointment came into effect over a year after ministers said they were happy for it to happen, and the files also show that the then Prime Minister had been aware from the start and also did nothing. There was time for these warning signs to be taken seriously. Why were no questions asked at all in that period? And in his written statement in the House earlier today, the Minister excused the lack of vetting and oversight because it was a royal replacing a royal. Does he agree that safeguards must be put in place for any future appointments like this? And can he please tell the House whether officials or ministers were aware at the time of Andrew's connection to Jeffrey Epstein, which had already been established when this appointment was made? Was this connection monitored? And can, finally, the Minister confirm that, given their absence in this release, that there are no documents pertaining to communications with Peter Mandelson about this appointment?
Madam Deputy Speaker, if I'm honest, I'm a bit miffed by the attitude of the Liberal Democrat frontbench, because I have regularly updated the Liberal Democrat frontbench ever since the humble address was brought forward. I have been as open and as possible as with their frontbench, and they have indicated privately, regularly to me, that they were perfectly happy with the progress that we were making. There are some difficulties about which I thought would be difficult for us to overcome. In particular, the connection between this and the police investigation. We obviously don't want to do anything that would imperil the police investigation. I think all honourable members would agree that if the police were to find evidence and felt that the Crown Prosecution Service should take forward charges in relation to misconduct in public office, we would all support the prosecuting authorities in doing their duty. I explained all of this to her honourable friends, and they indicated that they were perfectly happy with that process. I had thought that the police might ask us not to publish some of the material. In actual fact, they were they've been very cooperative, and they've allowed us to publish everything. And we have done some minor redactions, as I say. Some of those are in relation where it has absolutely nothing to do with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. For instance, when they're talking about the Royal Visits Committee, when they're talking about visits by other royal members of the royal family, then we haven't published that. We've redacted that material out. And also where there are possibilities that we might be upsetting our international allies. But she asked me in particular, therefore, about whether there are going to be any more papers that might be coming along. I'm not aware of any at this point. I suspect, as I said earlier, that this is the sum total of what we have. She makes the point quite rightly, and I think a lot of people are surprised, of course, as I think we've known for some time that there was no vetting done. It has been standard not to vet members of the royal family. She asked me if we were going to, would we vet anybody else who was appointed to such a role. We have no intention of appointing anybody to such a role in the future. But of course, we are grateful for the support that the royal family regularly provide. International visits around the world, His Majesty's visit to the United States of America, I think everybody, including those who disagreed with the visit, everybody has accepted that it was a great success. And I don't think we should be vetting His Majesty the King, and I don't think she's suggesting that either. So I think she was just trying to get grumpy with me. And I think that I've tried to answer all the Honourable Lady's questions. But I would reassure her, honestly, we have moved at pace as fast as we possibly can. It's difficult to find some of the paperwork because it is literally paperwork, and the government departments have changed multiple times in the intervening years, but we have moved as fast as we can.
Mr. Speaker, can I just say, for the record, I've not made any formal application to be a trade and investment envoy, and I previously was a trade and investment envoy under Prime Minister Theresa May, now in another place. What I am concerned about is that that particular programme is not cross-party. It was set up by then Lord Cameron, David Cameron, now in another place, and its strength, I felt, Madam Deputy Speaker, was in the fact that it was cross-party rather than full of mostly Labour members and Labour peers. So I just wanted to put that on the record. The Minister references the amount of paper, and it's paper-based, this exercise, but of course we haven't all gone to cloud overnight, and if you go down to Kew and the National Archives, you'll find a lot of paper down there where we can actually obtain records going back quite a long time, not just the last 20 or so years. But I wanted to ask him on a more substantive point, and that is the role of the FCDO. He will know, as a former foreign minister, that diplomatic telegrams are sent by embassies, often by ambassadors, back to London, and possibly even to the royal household. And I wonder whether any of those have been disclosed in the papers, which I have not had time to read today, because they've only just been laid. And then finally, whether any of those diptels or a response to those diptels have made their way to the office of senior royal officials in the royal household, and whether they knew anything about the activities of the former Prince Andrew, and who did they speak to about it, and what action, if any, was taken.
Well, he says he's not applied for a post as a trade envoy. I mean, I don't want to show the House the text messages he sent me. But anyway, and he makes a fair point. You know, I want to make sure that the Trade Envoy programme is one that is really effective and really delivers around the world. I was with Lord Alderdice the other day, obviously not a member of the Labour Party, at the London Stock Exchange when the Uzbek National Investment Fund was being listed in the UK, and we very much hope that his intervention in Uzbekistan has been enormously important in helping take forward some of these investments and into the UK and listings at the LSE. Indeed, we could see a further investment at the LSE, which would be the biggest ever listing here. We also have the Honourable Member for Mid-Norfolk, who's a Conservative member, who's a trade envoy and does a good job. I didn't understand the question he was asking me about diptels. As I said earlier, we are trawling through everything we possibly can to see whether there is anything else that is of relevance under the humble address terms. But so far, we have published everything that we have that is relevant, and I can guarantee the House that if there is anything more, then of course we will come forward. I should just say that I was also asked about whether there was any monitoring of the relationship between Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. seen by the honourable lady who's speaking for the Liberal Democrats. I didn't answer that question. I apologise. I have seen absolutely nothing to that effect either. So if I had, I would have published it.
And Kirsty Blackman.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first make clear I have no desire to be a trade envoy. Aberdeen is the best place on earth and I don't want to be anywhere other than there if I can help it. In terms of the statement that the Minister of State made, he said people are still looking. Would he be willing to advise us if they stop looking? I appreciate that they are currently perhaps actively looking because there may be boxes that they haven't gone through. Will he advise us at the point where there is definitely an end to this unless somebody accidentally comes across something? And then the second question is in relation to the trade envoys going forward. I'm not sure how happy or comfortable or how changed the process is for appointing trade envoys, but can he give us reassurance that the process is much better than it used to be? And if it's not, can he give us reassurance that he will look at that process to ensure that we can all feel comfortable that our trade envoys are the right people, or certainly not the wrong people to be doing that role?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to her that she doesn't want to be a trade envoy. I often feel as if I am a trade envoy for Scotland because we're often securing good deals, as we just have in the GCC and for that matter in India. We've just done remarkably well. I see the Honourable Lady for Plaid Cymru shaking her head. We've just done really well for Welsh lamb farmers in the GCC deal in the Gulf. Will I come back to the House when we stop? I'm suggesting that we have... I don't think there will be any more material. I will come back, obviously, if there is more material, and if I need to make probably a written ministerial statement, I think, rather than an oral statement, just to say that we have now ceased the process, and I will do that. She asked about due diligence. It's a significant point, and of course we do due diligence before anybody is appointed as a trade envoy under the present scheme. As I say, very different from what happened in relation to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, and I should say that the DBT Select Committee is presently doing an inquiry on some of these issues. I'm very happy to talk about the present Trade Envoy programme with them, but obviously there are delicacies about what we say about the past in case we were to enter into a situation which could compromise the police investigation. I'm very keen not to do that. I'm very glad that the police have been very helpful to us today in enabling us to be able to publish everything we can.
And the final question on this statement, Monica Harding.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Downing Street spokesperson is currently saying that a further tranche of files relating to the appointment are to be published at a future date, which is different from what the Minister is saying at the dispatch box. Perhaps he could clarify?
To be absolutely clear, I think this is probably the last tranche of material that we have. If I had more to publish, I would have published it today. I haven't got anything more to publish. So if there were more stuff, I reserve the right to publish more if there is more. But we're entering into speculation to some degree here. As I say, if there is more, we will publish it. I have instructed officials all along to work as fast as we possibly can and to be as transparent as we possibly can, and that's precisely what we will do. But as I say, at the moment, there isn't any more to publish. And by the way, Madam Deputy Speaker, we got a great GCC deal with the Gulf yesterday.
And that concludes the statement. I'll just give the front benches a few moments to swap over. Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Steel Industry Nationalisation Bill, second reading.
Now. The reasoned amendment in the name of the Leader of the Opposition has been selected. Minister to move second reading.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, for generations, the steel industry has stood at the very heart of our national story. From the furnaces of Sheffield to the docks of Port Talbot, from Scunthorpe to Redcar, steel forged not only the railways, ships and bridges and factories that powered the Industrial Revolution, steel built communities, livelihoods and a sense of pride in Britain. Steel made in Britain built our navy, helped defend our freedoms in times of war, and laid the foundations for a modern infrastructure right around the world. When people speak of the United Kingdom becoming a great industrial nation, they speak of the skill, the resilience, and the determination of steelworkers who helped shape that destiny by the fruits of their labour. The decline of the steel industry destroyed jobs, diminished skills, and damaged communities. But it never, ever diluted the pride, resilience and determination of those working people. Today, this steel industry nationalisation bill repays in part the debt that we owe Britain's steel communities. Steel is integral to the key growth-driving sectors of our industrial strategy, to advance manufacturing and the car industry, to clean energy in our wind turbines and in our grid infrastructure, to security and defence, the fighter jets, battleships and submarines. It is essential to this government's growth mission to create a strong, resilient economy delivering for working people. That's why Britain's steel sector accounts for thousands of jobs right across the country. I will give way.
And the nationalisation of steel, for the reasons that he mentioned, is of course a noble endeavour and something which many of us will agree with across the House. But he must rightly recognise that there are people in Wales pointing to the fact that there are now two pieces of legislation in relation to nationalising steel, while at Port Talbot we lost thousands of jobs. Does he recognise the feelings that remain in Wales because the option of nationalisation from this government was not on the table at the time?
As she knows, I've been to Port Talbot myself. I've launched a steel strategy since I came into office and we came into office. The vast majority of the decline to which she described happened under the previous administration. We are clearing out the mess on a whole bunch of fronts, on different areas of our public life. And I've invested, and this government has invested £500 million into that plant. And we have launched a steel strategy, which I believe will give it a very fruitful, prosperous future. We are doing what it takes to be the partner that they need in these times. And of course I'll give way.
Thank you, honourable friend, for giving way. The point, I think, which was made before is that the nationalisation of the steel industry makes an explicit linkage between our domestic and our international policy and the explicit need for us to go out and champion our steel sector by filling its order books in the way that wonderful trade deals that have been created in Nigeria with the expansion of its port and the railway projects behind it has been achieved by this government. That's the type of work I'm doing in Southern Africa. It's the type of work that we should all be going out to do on behalf of our country and our growth agenda.
I'm very grateful for his intervention. Of course, the work that he is doing is incredibly important into fulfilling the mission and the possibility that the British steel sector has in the 2020s going forward. And that is the purpose of having a strategy where we invest, we modernise, and then, of course, at times we need to protect as well. These are the things that we are doing, and these are the things that will deliver a long-term, sustainable, and also, yes, global future for Britain's steel industry. I will give way.
Just two quick questions, if he wouldn't mind. If this bill proceeds through the House, first question is, how does he think the global competition to compete with British forged steel will react? What are they likely to do? And secondly, if our steel becomes more expensive than the global market norm, what will manufacturers in the UK, what choice will they be faced with about where to base their manufacturing?
I'm grateful. I'm not sure why he would think it would be more expensive as a result. But take one step back. If we didn't protect, there would be no steel sector in order to export in the first place. So that is why I took the decision to invest, to modernise, and also protect where needed. If we had carried on the same trajectory for this government that we inherited from the previous one, I really would fear for any steelworks at all being capable of doing any exports let alone domestic supply as well. So this is the future that we are now creating. I'm going to make some progress because the debate has been cut short and I have taken quite a few interventions and I'm sure I'll find time later in my opening remarks, but let me make a bit of progress. I have pledged to make sure that Britain retains its capacity and its capability to manufacture steel. It is a commitment that I have made to honourable members in this House, and it is my commitment to the steel communities of this country. It is what underpins the steel strategy, and it is the primary purpose of the legislation that we are debating today. This House acted to support British Steel last year, one of the country's most vital steel firms. We recalled Parliament to pass the Steel Industry Special Measures Act so that the company's blast furnaces could remain lit and its workforce remain protected. I'm grateful to my predecessor, my right honourable friend, the member for Stalybridge and Hyde, for his leadership during that time. And I am grateful to the House for supporting that vital piece of legislation. When we intervened then, we were certain there was a future for British Steel. Our determination now is that the future may best be served by full public ownership in the national interest, not because of ideology, but because of practical pragmatism. Public ownership would allow us to explore future opportunities for this company and to retain its vital resource as a critical piece of our national infrastructure, one that is essential to economic resilience. I'll give way in a moment. One that is essential to our economic resilience. I want the company to play its part in driving up our domestic steel production to ensure that 50% of the steel used in this country is made in this country. I give way.
The gentleman for giving way. In keeping the options open that he hints at, has he had any discussions with his colleagues in defence, since there will always be, at least for the foreseeable future, a need for virgin steel for certain defence applications?
He raises a really important point. This is a government determined to make, produce and use more steel from the British sector in lots of different areas of the economy. We want to make sure that we are using government spending and procurement in driving up steel production in the UK. I had the privilege in a different sector to visit the Agratas gigafactory in Somerset. That's using 231 tonnes of British steel in its production. It does show, and of course that one investment is using a mounted investment from government as well. So government investment, private sector investment, and using British steel. It does show that actually when we align our priorities, we can drive up demand for British steel. I'll give way. Yeah.
Secretary of State for giving way. I want to ask him about the breadth of this bill. So in clause 1 of the bill, it makes it clear that a steel undertaking includes those businesses that have as part of their operations the manufacture or processing of iron or steel. Is there any lower threshold to that, or can a business which only has 1% of its operations in iron and steel be liable to nationalisation under this bill? And under clause 2, the Secretary of State is entitled to determine the public interest and can do so if nationalisation would support the economy of the UK or any part of the UK. Same question. Is there a lower threshold? Or would the interests of one town where a steel facility is located be sufficient to justify nationalisation of an entire company?
Grateful for the intervention. The public value test is a high test. And I think he will agree upon seeing the legislation, reading it as he has done, that is the case. I've set the bar high enough that this would only be triggered in extraordinary circumstances. Now, these are things that we can test when we go to committee stage in the coming days, I believe next week, or when we return from recess the next sitting week. Don't worry, we're not recalling Parliament again. And I'll address this a bit more in my speech to come. This is not a power that will be used routinely. This is a power that is specific, and the test for it will be high. Now, to that end, and I'll make some progress. To that end, we began good faith negotiations with the owners of British Steel, Jingye, to see if a commercial sale was viable but that was not proved possible. We could not agree terms that would have simultaneously safeguarded the integrity of the business and safeguarded the interests of the taxpayer. That is why the Prime Minister announced that the government's intention to bring British Steel into public ownership, subject to the public interest test being met at the time of that decision. And that's why we need to pass the Steel Industry Nationalisation Bill now, to give us the power to make that possible. Now, let me be clear to the House, again in answer to his question. The powers being given to the government by this legislation cannot be exercised without due caution and proper care. These powers are bold, but they are not boundless. They can only be used where there is a clear public interest and where they will be needed to safeguard British steelmaking capability. The bill itself does not, of itself, nationalise British Steel. It grants the government powers to do so if considered necessary. That's the scope of the legislation that we are debating today. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long... I will.
Being very generous. And I take him at his word. I don't think that he intends to use this legislation otherwise than appropriately. But there is an important point to be made about the language which is in the bill as it stands. And as he knows, at the moment, the public interest is defined in certain ways in Clause 2 of the bill, but what it says is that that is a definition that is not limited. So there could be other grounds on which the public interest might be met. And I've already pointed out one aspect in which that public interest test is relatively broad. So can I invite him to look again at the public interest test to make sure not just that we rely on his word, which I do, but also that we are confident that succeeding Secretaries of State cannot misuse this power to nationalise too broadly.
I'm very grateful for his intervention again. I can see this is an important part. I knew when I was bringing these powers in and working through the legislation that this was going to be an important part of this legislation and quite rightly subject of scrutiny. Again, there will be time because there's significant time in committee of the whole House so that members can scrutinise this. But just to say that we're modelling this bill on the Banking Act. And the Banking Act, I think, has worked effectively. And you can see in that circumstance where the powers were used during the financial crisis, it was used in extremis, and the powers that were brought in there for which we're modelling this on have not been used irresponsibly since. I've been very clear in my use and my expected use of these powers, and the bar that I see set in the legislation meets my expectations, including the limits of my power to use it in ways that I think would cause concern for members across this House. Madam Deputy Speaker, for too long, the steel sector in this country has been left to fend for itself, abandoned by government, demoralised, starved of resources, and victim to international market distortions. Crude steel production has declined by more than 50% in the last decade. Capabilities have been reduced. Communities have been let down. Previous governments have been too reactive and not proactive. This government will not repeat the errors of the past. We are building the future for British Steel. While the industry faces challenges today, we will do everything we can to help it modernise and to grow. This legislation allows us to apply that policy to this industry. We recognise that securing the long-term future of the UK steel sector relies on both public and private investment for modernisation. For the UK to become a global leader in clean, green steel, in electric arc furnaces and decarbonised steel production. We recognise that blast furnace production will need to continue in the immediate future, and that a managed transition is vital to maintaining supply. We need this legislation to raise resilience, to protect businesses up and down the country who depend on Britain's steel, to defend the workforce at British Steel, and to safeguard the communities built on British steel. The significance of steel is not simply a matter of history, it is a matter of our national future. In an uncertain world, the ability to make steel remains a strategic national asset. Steel is essential for our transport networks, our energy security, our housing and our transition to a greener economy. That is why supporting the British steel industry is about more than protecting jobs, important though those obviously are. Supporting British steel, I'll give way in just a moment. Supporting British steel is more than about national pride, though we are proud of the steelworkers who helped build it. Nationalising British steel is about hope and faith in the future. I give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. I didn't want to interrupt him, but I thought it was an appropriate time to intervene. As a member of the GMB Trade Union Executive Council, I was really pleased to see my union welcome the government's move to nationalise British Steel, which they described as decisive and timely intervention that will protect one of the UK's most important industries. And this is a sentiment that has been echoed throughout the trade union movement. So does my right honourable friend agree that we must engage with the trade unions throughout this process and utilise their expertise in this area to secure the long-term future of British steel?
Look, he raises a really important point. You know, the workers in steel production facilities have played a really important role in shaping our policies, helping us constructively to find a way through. Members on both sides were prodding me to release the steel strategy swifter, but at the time of developing the steel strategy, there were so many moving parts to it. There are global forces at work. There were different ownership models. There were different points and different production facilities with different challenges in different parts of the steel community. The voices that were expressed in the constructive, and I say this again, the highly constructive role played by the unions, GMB and community, I pay absolute tribute to the way that those unions and others really helped to design and find a way through some really challenging strategic issues for which we had to find our way. Now, together with our measures on automotives and digital technology, life sciences, the defence industries, clean energy, ceramics and chemicals, for which we made announcements just today, and advanced manufacturing, taking the power to make possible the nationalisation of British steel heralds the new dawn of an age of British industrialisation. I give way.
Secretary of State for giving way. But given that no UK steel producers produce the level and the specialist grades of steel used by precision engineers like Gibbs Gears in Stoke Mandeville in my constituency that supply components to the aerospace and defence sector, what can the Secretary of State say is in this bill for them? Because all they can see is tariffs incoming on the steel that they necessarily have to import because nobody makes it here.
You will know that when I took the difficult decision to introduce measures, I did so against products that would compete directly with the products that we are making, are capable of making domestically. Specialty steel, of course, is going through an administration process at the moment. But when that is complete and it is up and running properly, I need to make sure that the market for its products and services are actually protected and able to be viable domestically. And I think everyone in this House should, in the world that we are living in, where national resilience is so incredibly important to our nation and the economy in a way that it simply hasn't been for decades and decades, the decisions I am making to make sure that we have British steel production that can be viable and sustainable into the future is of paramount importance. I'm going to make a bit more progress. With government working alongside businesses to invest, modernise and protect Britain's manufacturing base, the amendment would deny second reading to the bill. The very people who did so much to damage the steel in government are now trying to do so again from opposition. Then, as tragedy, now as farce. The House should reject it as such. Britain's steel industry needs an activist, interventionist government. It needs determination, decisiveness and delivery. It does not need a government with its hands tied, its room for manoeuvre blocked and its ability to act denied. Britain must have a strong domestic steel industry now and into the future. I beg to move.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and before I call the Shadow Minister, Can I just say to members that there are a lot of members that want to put their remarks on the record as they've got a direct constituency interest, quite rightly. I will be starting with an immediate 6-minute time limit for backbench speeches, but very swiftly moving to 3 minutes to enable as many as we can to get in to speak on this very, very important topic. Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Conservatives will never be neutral about the deindustrialisation of our country. But we don't believe that politicians or Whitehall bureaucrats should run businesses. Instead, we need a government that does fewer things better, defending our nation, securing energy supplies and restoring the nation's finances. We believe in British steelmaking and the importance of sovereign capabilities, and not just steelworks, but the steel supply chain, critical minerals and many defence-related technologies. But that is not what this bill does. This bill is the government's attempt to break out of a mess we warned 1 year ago they were getting themselves into. And it fails even in the government's own terms. It does not keep the blast furnaces open, and it does not guarantee that military needs can be met domestically. So let's be clear what we are doing today. We're being asked to nationalise British Steel, to put the British taxpayer permanently on the hook for a business this government had every chance to keep in private hands and chose not to. They ignored plans to open electric arc furnaces on Teesside and chose to let the situation deteriorate until the only option left was the one that suited their ideology. The Prime Minister went kowtowing to China, gave them an embassy spy base, and instead of a deal on Jingi, came back with a box of fortune cookies with only a bill for the taxpayer to be found inside. Of course I'll give way.
For giving way, can I just seek some clarity from him? Is the Conservative Party position that they would prefer British steel in the hands of the Chinese than the British?
There was a wasted intervention, Madam Deputy Speaker. If he lets me continue, I will explain exactly what the Conservative plan for British Steel, and it's a better plan and a more sustainable plan than we've heard from the government today. This government didn't inherit.
I'm most grateful to the Shadow Minister for giving way. As he was unable to answer the previous intervention, perhaps he'd like to explain why the Conservative government did sell British steel to the Chinese in 2019 against my specific advice.
I know that that when it suits him, the honourable gentleman claims to be a fan of the late Margaret Thatcher, but he seems to have forgotten that most of her time in office was untangling the mess of Labour's nationalisations in the past. And unlike him, she didn't bend with the wind or find herself in the same lobby as a government that's hiked taxes to record highs, driven wealth offshore, or is drowning business in red tape. Now, honourable members would like to know what our plan is. And our plan is to address the cause, not the symptoms. They would be well to listen to this, Madam Deputy Speaker. We might have more of a steel industry left if they do. Because you cannot have an industrial policy for steel without an energy policy for industry. Britain has the highest industrial energy electricity prices in the world. And every choice that the government is making has pushed those prices further up. This week, they voted against new licences in the North Sea, choosing to import from Norway gas that could be drilled here at a cost of 200,000 jobs, 12 billion in tax revenue. Now, Secretary of State does know this. Their backbenchers know this. But the Prime Minister is too weak to stand up to his windmill fetishist Energy Secretary. We have offered an alternative. Our cheap plan would slash energy prices and improve energy